We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot, season number 4, episode number 23. Yeah, man, we upon the weekend. First and foremost, I hope you guys had a great week so far. Hope you guys been checking out everything across the sporting landscape. And man, I'm feeling good, man, as we get into the weekend. There's a lot of things going on across the sporting landscape. And first and foremost, in the NFL, we got the AFC Championship game, the NFC Championship game. We down to the Final Four in the NFL. All these teams have a legitimate shot of getting to the Super Bowl. The Chiefs positioning themselves one victory away from getting to their third consecutive Super Bowl, on a journey to try to make history in the NFL with 3 consecutive Super Bowl championships. We got the Washington Commanders on the doorstep of getting to the Super Bowl. We got the Philadelphia Eagles trying to get to the Super Bowl. Their second appearance would be in the last 3 seasons. Can't forget about the Buffalo Bills. Bills Mafia stand up. They're trying to get to the Super Bowl for the first time in over 30 years. And man, we're going to break that down on this episode. Of course, I got my NFL correspondent, Dolphin correspondent, Steve, falling through as we break down the conference championship games. And also, too, there's been some news on the landscape in the NFL. First things first, it looks like the Dallas Cowboys, they real close to hiring Brian Schottenheimer as the new head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And, Brian, he's been across the NFL, for several years. I remember his stint up in New York for the New York Jets a few years ago as the offensive coordinator. And, from our OGs, man, Schottenheimer, son of the late, great Marty Schottenheimer. He was one of my favorite coaches in the National Football League. And so it looks like he's going to get a crack at that Dallas Cowboys job. And I will say this once again with the Dallas Cowboys and Jerry Jones, late to the party again. There's been some coaches out there, and not to put shade on Brian Schottenheimer, but there's some coaches out there that I felt, may be in a better position for the Dallas Cowboys moving forward. And for me, I'm just going to call it straight, man. It looks like the Dallas Cowboys may have another minion in Brian Schottenheimer. Hey, you coach the team, but, at the end of the day, Jerry Jones is the first and forefront and focal point of the organization. And late to the party once again, man. So we'll see how that thing unfolds down there in Dallas. Speaking of the New York Jets, congratulations to Aaron Glenn. He's the new head coach of the New York Jets, former defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. Former first-round pick of the New York Jets in that fantastic 1998 draft with Randy Moss and Peyton Manning and so forth, and, Ryan Leaf and all of that. So he gets his crack at his first head coaching job. We'll see what it do up in New York for Aaron Glenn, see if he's able to turn that program around. Not sure if, Aaron Rodgers, speaking of Aaron's, not sure if Aaron Rodgers will be back in the fold for the New York Jets. We'll get into that at some point. Also, too, man, the Jacksonville Jaguars, man, they're in the news, man. Looks like they let go of Trent Baalke, the general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I remember his tenure out in San Francisco. Him and Harbaugh, they definitely butted heads, and his reputation across the National Football League hadn't been pristine, and looks like the Jaguars are going to move on from him. So, got another general manager position that's open in the NFL. Looks like, they're in the position to try to hire their next coach as well. So we'll see what things do up in Jacksonville. But we're going to shift gears just a little bit, man. We're going to shift gears just a little bit before we dive into the NFL. And we're going to go to the NBA. And there's a couple things in the NBA that's caught my eye. And one of those things is this whole Jimmy Butler drama. Now, first and foremost, it's your first time listening, man. I appreciate your ear. I appreciate the check-in, man. We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. hot fire takes and analysis across the sporting landscape. And my opinions about this whole Jimmy Butler situation. You know, my Chicago Bulls drafted Jimmy Butler, the 30th pick overall out of Marquette. And Jimmy Butler made himself into a player. No doubt about it. He made himself into a player. So, Bulls fans, we have a special place for JB, man. He did an outstanding job for my Chicago Bulls while he was there. Turned himself into a superstar in the league. But I think Jimmy Butler has become a diva. And I'm going to keep it all 100. Now, I'm not mad at a player that, feels like, hey, he's worth a few extra coins. That's all cool and all. But at the end of the day, it comes to a point, man, where you become a distraction to your teammates, man, and to the organization as a whole. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to take a wild guess. There's a lot of players on the Miami Heat roster that's not making $52 million next season with an opt-in. Meaning that Jimmy Butler is not, I'm not one to count pockets. But I don't think he living paycheck to paycheck, if you know what I mean. So I think at the end of the day, it's cool if you want out of Miami. That's all cool and fine. And, you can work that out with Mickey Harrison, the owner, and Pat Riley, the general manager, OG Pat Riley. But at the end of the day, man, you got to show up and play. These antics about you, missing flights and then, hey, I'm going to take a private flight to the game or whatever. And the Miami Heat told him, you know what, player? You might as well go ahead and stay home, man, for this road trip. And I think this has been an ugly divorce, to say the least. We got the NBA trade deadline coming up in a couple of weeks. And so, I got a feeling that Jimmy Butler will be moved at some point. Now, his destination, I'm not sure where his destination is going to be. But this is a straight-up diva move. And at the end of the day as well, whatever team that is interested in his services, it's not a good look, man. It is not a good look for him moving forward, just in regards. And, as I mentioned, we keep it straight 100 on here, man. There's a lot of people, in America, we got a tough economic times going on right now, man. Truly, there's a lot of people that's, hurting to sincerely put food on the table for not only themselves, but also to their family, man. And so a lot of people have been, poking at the NBA with the ratings decline. And this is Exhibit A. Meaning that at the end of the day, man, any hardworking individual who's enjoyed the sporting landscape as I do, we just want the athletes to go out there, man, and just do what the contract, and be beholden to your contract, man. If you sign, dude, just go out there and be a professional and play ball. You can make whatever wishes you wish through your agent and everything, man. But at the end of the day, there's 11 other dudes on the active roster, man, that go to work every day just like you, man. And 98% of them is not making $52 million a season. So, Jimmy, man, I'm going to need you to, just kind of fall back, brother, and see where the chips may unfold as far as your trade demands. But at the end of the day, you got to be professional, brother. And you got to go out there and at least for your reputation, man, show that you're a guy that's still wanting and still can be an asset to a team that's in the mode of trying to win a championship, man. So that's my one thing about the NBA. The other thing, which is, man, boy, this is beyond funny, man. And if truly to my OGs of the show, man, once again, I appreciate the check-in as well. You guys know how I feel about the Los Angeles Lakers. Word on the street is, Anthony Davis and LeBron James, want the Lakers to move forward and try to, bring in a couple extra pieces for them to be a championship contending team. Boy, stop. I mean, come on, man. Can we just hit this on repeat, man? I know it's a lot of people out there that rock with LeBron James, and, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, right now. And so I just want to make sure this is perfectly clear. At the end of the day, you are the guy that kickstarted or was the guy that was in position to say that, hey, man, we need to bring in some, other guys to make the team competitive. We get this every single year in January, it appears. Every single year, it's the same old tune. The same old tune. And I'm like, at the end of the day, man, the Lakers, they have, traded draft picks, traded guys, Russell Westbrook and D'Angelo Russell more recently, and all of this and all of that. Is that, bruh, it's over, man. It's a new league, man. And I know it's hard for a lot of people to kind of come to grips with that. I do have a tremendous respect for my OG Laker fans out there that's been Laker fans since back in the day when, Irvin Magic Johnson played for the Los Angeles Lakers and the Shaq and Kobe version of the Lakers. But this is a new era in Los Angeles from the standpoint of it's a new league. And at the end of the day, Jenny Buss has to put her foot in the sand and say, hey, look, we're not going to just constantly just turn this roster over. It's the same old mechanism moves, man. If you look at the teams at the top of the league and you just look at, just their quote-unquote superstar players, at the end of the day, if they do make any demands, they make those privately, man. They make them privately. And so at the end of the day, it's just the same old sad tune. I'm not sure when they going to wake up, and I mean the Lakers organization, and realize, man, at this point, it's probably in their best interest to cut their losses. And yeah, I'm putting it out there. I think the Los Angeles Lakers should explore trading LeBron James as well as potentially Anthony Davis. Because you got to rebuild this roster at some point. LeBron is not going to be able to play forever. Anthony Davis right now, he's 31 years old. I still think it's some tread on the tires with Anthony Davis, respectively. He's one of Chi-Town's own. And so I just feel at the end of the day, they got to put their foot in the sand, man, and make a decision that we can get a bevy of draft picks and other young players for these two guys. And you're just going to be spinning your wheels until you do that. They brought J.J. Redick into the whole ordeal. First time head coaching job for him. And man, it's tough sledding. I've been very, very critical of J.J. Redick, man. But, this whole situation is tough sledding from a standpoint of is the expectations, or if the expectations is to win a championship with this current roster of what you got, it ain't happening. So that's my piece, man, about the NBA. Just a couple of tidbits that I peeped. And coming up, I got my NFL correspondent, Dolphin correspondent, Steve falling through as we break down the AFC and the NFC championship games coming up on Sunday. We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. Welcome back to We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. And man, we got the conference championship games kicking off this weekend. The divisional games was definitely exciting. A bunch of teams sent home, 1, 2, 3 Cancun mode. And I got a special guest, man. If you're an OG of the show, he rocked with us in season number 3 and season number 2. I got my NFL correspondent, Dolphin correspondent in the building, my man Steve. What's going on, sir?
Pretty good. It's good to be back. Talking football. It's the end of the year, but it's the right time of the year. It's, leading into the playoffs and eventually the Super Bowl.
Yeah, man, it's been a hot minute, man, and there's been a lot of news across the National Football League. I definitely want to get your insights on what jumped off across the league. We got some coaches out here, some coaching vacancies out here. But first, man, I want to get into your Miami Dolphins, man. We're going to take it down to the 305, man. We're going to take it down to the 305, man. And, obviously the Dolphins this season, there was a lot of things that jumped off. You guys missed the playoffs. You had, Tyreek Hill with his whole situation, with the little after game situation. And so, first and foremost, man, what was your thoughts, man, on the Dolphins, man, and what happened this year for y'all, man?
Yeah, my Dolphins. Ironically enough, I was probably more hurt on the Hurricanes than I was on the Dolphins, but that's a different subject for another day. But yeah, I mean, it all boils down to two things stick out on the season. It's the narrative that's been pushed about the Dolphins, probably from the beginning of the Mike McDaniel era. Is basically, the team's a good team, a good front running team. You could put up a lot of points, good offense. When they're in Miami, when it's September, they put up points, but physically they're soft. And when things get into the winter part of the season, and that timing just isn't ideal and perfect for Tua. The team struggles and they have difficulty stopping people. and they also have a difficulty putting up points. And against the good teams, you see that, it comes to the forefront a whole lot. And it all boils down to really Tua. And like I said, it's an offense that's based on timing and it's based on everything being ideal and perfect. And when you get to playing against the tougher teams in cold weather and on the road, difficult situations, there's nothing ideal, and there's going to be, you got to basically line up against the man in front of you and beat them. And the Dolphins have struggled to do that.
Yeah, man, and it's, interesting, man, because we've had a lot of conversations about the Dolphins the last couple of years. And for me, last year was really, I was watching the Dolphins just to see the identity. Now, you got one of the top offenses in the league, especially when you talk about last year, putting up 70 pieces and so forth. And the defensive side, you guys was a mass unit last year, bringing in cats off the street. I thought coming into this season, I thought it was going to be a little bit different from the standpoint. I thought you guys had took your lumps last year. And usually when you see with ball clubs, they usually grow from that. You see some kind of growth with that, especially when you got talent. And the talent to me is not really the question in Miami, especially on the offensive side of the ball. The defensive side of the ball, obviously it's a piece here, piece there type of deal. But I thought on the offensive side of the ball, I thought you guys was balanced. As you mentioned a little earlier, really a timing offense. But when Tua got hurt, and he missed that little stretch, I mean, it's like the bottom fell out. And it was just surprising. I think the biggest guy, because a lot of people talk about the stats, from the cheetah, from Hill, stats went down, this season compared to last season. But I thought the biggest guy that kind of took a dip was Waddle. He kind of took a kind of a dip. But what's your thoughts overall, man, just as far as, just his production from you guys? Because, Hill was basically the superstar guy that you got. But talk to me a little bit about the others, man, you saw on the offense for y'all this year.
Well, obviously injuries play a little bit of a role, especially early on in the season as it relates to Waddle. He was battling some injuries early on. The whole team struggled really offensively early on. I mean, you see that Buffalo game where, they just basically got dismantled and beat early in the season. And these were games that Tua was starting. This kind of happened before the injury. So, later on in the season, he kind of, when he came back, he kind of put it together a little bit. But, production across the board was down. Production across the board with all the receiving corps, with the exception of Jonnu Smith, who was big time. And I think his stats, he kind of took away a little bit of something from Tua. But that to me was more so the offense just changing a bit, and they realized that with the timing-based offense, you got somebody other than Tua in there. The timing just isn't right, and it's not ideal. You don't have the best offensive line, so you get pressure up the middle. Smaller quarterbacks that have difficulty getting the ball, into certain spaces. You just saw John New become a safety valve and take away catches from both Tyreek and Waddle. So, and he had a breakout year and he carried the team a little bit. But that was just more so an adjustment, really, right? You couldn't drive the ball downfield. We couldn't get the ball in the middle of the field the way we were with peak Tua. So it was, let's dump it off. Let's use a bigger body in the middle of the field, especially with two smaller receivers. And, and you saw dividends as it relates to Jonnu. But, he was the only bright spot to me. Him and A-Chain, obviously. A-Chain staying healthy the whole year. That was nice to see. The offensive line is a reclamation project. They're going to have to redo that. Injuries across the board. I'm not sold on Tua. I think, ultimately, I don't think the Dolphins could ever win the championship with Tua. I think you might. The only way they could do it is if basically you get the number one seed, and I don't think Tua's good enough to go out and beat some of the upper echelon quarterbacks. I don't think Tua could do it. So, so I'm not optimistic. Defensively, Anthony Weaver, his first year, good the jury's still out. I mean, there's not a ton of talent on that defensive side of the ball, especially on the back end. I mean, you take away, the defensive line, you lost some players. You took away, some of the size up front with injuries. So they kind of struggled a little bit to stop the run. But they were bend but don't break for the most part of the year. But like I said, the jury's still out. At the end of the day, the team, though, it's going to depend on Tua, and I just don't think he can get the job done.
Yeah, and that's really the elephant in the room is Tua. Not only for play, but obviously health reasons. I think that Jonnu Smith, I thought he was the second best tight end in the league the last 6 weeks of the season outside of Brock Bowers. Real talk.
Right.
The boy played his butt off, man. And so I think that that's a plus going into next season for you guys. And, there's been a lot of talk, with Mike McDaniel and just his tenure kind of moving forward. I actually like Mike, but I just think that it's some fundamental things that you guys may, change. And I think part of that, though, comes with personnel. So, you got an opportunity in the offseason via the NFL draft and free agency to kind of bring in some what I consider tough-minded guys, especially on the defensive end. I think the offense is really fine outside of like Tua and his durability and availability. But I think on the defensive side, and Weaver, like you said, jury's still out. I think he did an I job, but I think the jury's still out for him, man. But we'll definitely see, man, what the Dolphins do, moving forward as we trug along into the offseason with them. We definitely got to connect, gang, and circle back just in regards to the Dolphins down in the 305. And speaking of teams, man, my Chicago Bears, man, we just made a move to bring in Ben Johnson as the head coach, formerly offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. What's your thoughts, man, about the move? Because we had a conversation about this actually off record as far as just kind of who we thought might be the best coach for the Bears in regards. So what's your thoughts, man, on Ben Johnson going to Chicago, man?
Yeah, I mean, with the guys that are out there as far as upside, he's probably it. But, you don't know what kind of culture builder he is. The Bears need a culture builder. I mean, great X's and O coach. Obviously, Lions, one of the top offenses in the league. But his ability to work with Jared Goff and, maximize his ability was great. And, they have weapons across the board. So I think offensively, he'll be a good fit. But this hire was basically to see what he could do to get the most out of Caleb Williams. He's the best quarterback whisperer amongst the candidates that are available. So, you invest the number one draft pick in a quarterback. Obviously, you see, what Washington is doing with their quarterback. You look back and you say, our guy was taken first. He was taken ahead of him. He's a franchise quarterback. Generational talent. We need to get the most out of him, or else everybody's going to be losing their job. So who was the guy that could get the most out of him? It's Ben Johnson. But it wasn't just the quarterback that was y'all issue. It was the entire team, right? The identity of the team, the locker room, there was some issues there. All these things that, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Dolphins. We just talked about Mike McDaniel and how great X's and O guy, but is he a leader of men? And that's what we got to see from Ben Johnson. Can he lead this ball club? I mean, what he's going to do on the offensive side of the ball, but can he lead the defensive side of the ball? And can he set an identity with the Bears? Different market than a lot of other markets, right? It's cold weather when it's in the black and blue division still, and there's a lot of really good teams and a lot of really good coaches and a lot of really good quarterbacks in that division. So he's going to have his work cut out for him. His ability to kind of know the Lions and and that organization and that defense, so that's going to help out probably right away. But you still have a really good team in Green Bay, and you got a really good team in Minnesota, both on the upswing, arguably the best division in football. So, he's going to have his work cut out. But I think this is strictly a selection to help out Caleb Williams and get the most out of him.
Yeah, and I thought you made a great point about, what Jaden Daniels is doing in Washington. I mean, you can't ignore that. I mean, they're a doorstep away from getting to the Super Bowl. I just think that, as you mentioned a little earlier as well, is that when you invest the number one overall pick in the quarterback, I think the Bears did a good job last year with just the offensive weapons. And there's been a lot of criticism of Ryan Poles. And Steve, I think you'll probably kind of see where I'm going with this. Usually in the National Football League, where you've got a general manager, you bring a guy in, the good ones or the most productive ones, Steve, they build from the inside out. Whether it's defensive line or offensive line, they usually build from the inside out. And I thought that Poles, he built from the outside in. And we saw that this season where, your offensive line was just janky. They couldn't really could protect Caleb Williams. I thought overall Caleb Williams had a good season just based on the circumstances. One, just going through the season and not missing a game and just being healthy. You just get a gold star for that first and foremost. And two, I think he had about 5 picks on the year, and that's not bad. But I think at the end of the day, the pressure is on the Bears. You take, their lead guy talking about the Detroit Lions, to the divisional foe. So we definitely get some intel on them. And so for me, it's going to be interesting. As I mentioned, in our conversation we had off record, was that I thought that they were more in line to try to bring in a more veteran coach, a coach that's kind of been to the mountaintop, say, before. But to me, once Vrabel got off the board, once, Belichick, going to Chapel Hill got off the board, your only other choice in that was really Mike McCarthy, And I just think that, to me, kind of a retread. I thought that the Bears, if you're going to take a shot, you might as well go ahead and try to take a home run shot at the end of the day. It may pay off dividends, man. So we'll see what the Bears do. My Bears do, man, moving forward as we trug along into the off season. And now let's get into these matchups, man, on Sunday, man. We got the AFC Championship game. We got the NFC Championship game. And I'm going to start off in the AFC, man. We got Josh Allen, we got Patrick Mahomes, the Buffalo Bills, and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Bills, they was able to knock off the Baltimore Ravens. Very close, exciting game. I mean, probably one of the most exciting games of last week, minus that Rams and Commanders matchup. And Kansas City, knocking off the Houston Texans. What's your early thoughts, man, about this matchup, man, on the AFC side, man, coming up on Sunday, man?
Well, Kansas City, Buffalo, I think, I think the two best teams in the AFC, and they ended up meeting each other. And I think most people would have predicted this too, especially when you started to see how the season was kind of making its way. You knew these guys even after the first matchup. You knew there was a high probability these two teams were going to see each other again in the playoff. The key for me is, Kansas City's defense. I mean, I know it's about Pat, it's Kelsey and Andy Reid and all that. Kansas City got the best defense in the league. And I think defensively is where they've been winning games. And many of instances this season, they've won games in spite of Pat Mahomes and in spite of the inconsistency with the receiving core, in spite of the offensive line with penalties and mistakes. So I think their defense is stellar, and I think it's going to be tough. I mean, it's hard to root against Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes a second time around, and that defense is Spags. It's hard for a team to beat them twice. And I can't see Buffalo going into Kansas City and beating them for a second time this season. It's kind of hard. But, I think it'll be I think, it can't be the whole game on the Buffalo side of things. It can't be the whole game of Josh Allen being Superman. It's going to have to be a collective effort. It's going to have to be involving his receivers. It's going to have to be, getting the running game going. And their defense is going to have to come up with turnovers. If their defense can't come up with turnovers, it's going to be hard for me to see them even, keeping this game close. They have to turn the ball over to win this game. So that's going to be an important part of it. And, Pat's pretty vulnerable. I think Pat can turn the ball over. So, they can make a game out of this and win this again, and it would be great. But, like I said, it's just hard to think that Pat Mahomes is going to and Andy Reid get beat a second time against a team in the season.
Yeah, man, and I think conversely for Buffalo, I think it's the defense that wins this football game. They're gonna win this game because I thought that last week against Baltimore, Josh Allen, I mean, he threw for under 200 yards, and it was the defense that won the game. Especially you go in and you tell me, man, you have Baltimore have 2 turnovers in the first half. Yeah, that evens it a little bit up because obviously Baltimore, they're a little bit more talented, like from top to bottom. Especially on the offensive side, they just simply got more weapons than Buffalo. But once you get to turning the ball over, you make it an even playing field. And I think for Buffalo, as you mentioned, to go in the Arrowhead and beat them twice, that defense got to play some ball, man. And I think that, we saw the ghost of Von Miller last week, flashback for him. And I think if it was 5 years ago, Von Miller would have took that to the house. So I just think that for me, it's really Buffalo's defense because I think that Mahomes and Allen, they pretty much going to go to a draw, whether it be ball efficiency as we kind of saw last week with these 2 guys, or it's shootout mode. And I just think that they're going to pretty much kind of, in essence, kind of cancel themselves out. And it's going to boil down to who make the biggest defensive play on either side of the ball, whether it be, Kansas City or Buffalo. And so this was the most difficult game, man, for me to predict going in. I mean, it's basically a coin flip. Obviously you lean kind of towards the favorite of, say, Arrowhead, and just Kansas City and Taylor Swift, and not sure if Caitlin Clark gonna show back up again. We'll see about that. But this is a tough one, man. I'm gonna go against the grain, man. I got Buffalo in this one, man. I just think it's gonna be a Nick Tuck game, and I think, Steve, it's gonna be one play, especially in the second half, that's gonna be a game changer in this football game. But this one was, man, this is like flipping a coin straight up, man. This is 50-50 for me. But we'll definitely see what that do, man, and see if the Kansas City Chiefs can get back to the Super Bowl on their quest to win a 3rd consecutive Super Bowls. Never been done in NFL history. And we transition to the NFC side. We got the boy wonder and Jaden Daniels and Dan Quinn and just the whole move that the Washington Commanders have been able to do so far this season. And they got the Philadelphia Eagles. Saquon Barkley, man, just looking like a cyborg out there. Jalen Hurts, it appears he was a little nicked up during that game last week. What's your thoughts, man, on the NFC side, man?
Well, now it's kind of similar to Kansas City and the Bills. Being a team a second, I believe a 3rd time in a season, and that's difficult to do. But I think at the end of the day, Philadelphia has a better team, and you keep waiting for Cinderella shoes to drop, and Jaden Daniels been lights out in the playoffs. I mean, he does not look like a rookie, doesn't play like a rookie, but when he also hasn't been in a ton of adversity in these playoffs either. So, what happens when, you turn the ball over, or what happens against a really tough Philadelphia defense? What happens when, you're on the road and you're turning the ball over and the momentum is shifted? These are, what veteran quarterbacks overcome, the great quarterbacks overcome, and have success in the playoffs. And you ask yourself, can Jaden Daniels do that? And, statistically and the odds just don't speak against that. But, he's been surprising folks. He's been surprising us throughout these playoffs. And so there's a good possibility that Washington could pull this game off, just simply because they've been fighting. They got a really good team, a surprisingly good team. Most people don't understand just how good they are on the offensive side of the ball, and even on the defensive side of the ball. There's some players back there. They have some really good draft picks that have panned out for them. And then they got some veteran guys up front and on the front 7. So, a system that, that has proven to win games in Seattle. So, that's won Super Bowls. So I don't think they have the same level, obviously the same level of talent as the Legion of Boom, but, they got some players there. Bobby Wagner did come from that defense. So, I think, though, it's going to be a close game because Philadelphia's passing game is almost non-existent right now. Right? They can't complete the ball down the field. They barely threw him for over 100 yards in a couple of games.
Oh yeah.
And so, they've still succeeded, and they succeeded because they got Saquon. But at some point, somebody's going to game plan to take away Saquon and make them beat them through the air. And can they do that? I don't know. I just don't think, they're that, efficient and prolific on the passing game. So I actually like Washington to keep, at the very least, keep this one close. It's hard for me to just go ahead and pick them as an outright winner, but I like them to keep this game pretty close.
Yeah, man, it's going to be interesting, man. And because to me, it's something that you mentioned just a little bit earlier when you talked about Jaden Daniels, man. I mean, this guy had no turnovers, being in the playoffs. I just think that Philadelphia, especially when you talk about up front, and I got to put some respect on Jalen Carter's name, man. This guy's played some outstanding football. I mean, he reminds me of a young Warren Sapp. Just those plays, man, those timely plays and the great defensive tackles, man, that's what it's about. It's the timely plays when you make those plays. And I think that for me, I think Washington's going to get a little adversity in this game, whether it be a turnover, whether it be them just not being able to just march straight down the field and score on Philadelphia. So I think they're going to get a little bit adversity in this football game. So we're definitely going to see. I think Saquon Barkley, I think he's the best player on the field. And that's no disrespect to, Jaden Daniels, but I just think that if Saquon get the rolling, it's a wrap. And I think that even though Philadelphia's offense has been anemic in the passing game, it ain't because they ain't got guys back there. I mean, anybody take Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown any day of the week. And I just think that Washington, based on their scheme, as you mentioned, got Dan Quinn, formerly defensive coordinator in Seattle. They play a lot of man back there. And I just think that, A.J. Brown, he only really need a couple, 2-3 catches, man, big catches, and he can change the momentum of a football game. Devontae Smith as well. I just think that Philadelphia, they're the more talented team. They're the more experienced team. I think that Washington do keep it close because this is a division rival, as we mentioned a little earlier. It's their third time playing. I just think that Philadelphia is a more veteran team than Washington, and I think it shows itself this coming Sunday, man, especially with this game in Philadelphia. The crowd going to be on one. So I got the Eagles winning this game, man. I think it's going to be about a one possession, 7-point type of win, one possession type win, man. But I got the Eagles fly in this one, man. So we'll definitely see. And man, bro, I know it's been a minute, man. I absolutely appreciate the fall through and the check-in. We definitely got to link back up, man, and get into the Super Bowl, man. Is that crack off? Also, too, when some of these head coaching vacancies get filled, I know you in the New York area, so, got that Jets job open, a few other jobs across the league, New Orleans, Jacksonville, the Las Vegas Raiders. So we'll definitely connect gang on that, man. And so once again, man, I appreciate you falling through. And for you guys, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on Fire Sports Podcast, the spot. Yeah, man, so I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Man, we had a lot of things crack off on this episode as we're now at the weekend. A lot of things going across the sporting landscape from this weekend, primarily the NFL with the AFC and NFC championship games jumping off. First and foremost, man, I want to thank my special guest, Steve, NFL correspondent, Dolphin correspondent, for falling through, previewing the games that's coming up this weekend. Also, too, man, you can check me out. I'm on Twitter at We On Fire Sports. Also, too, we on YouTube at We On Fire Sports Podcast. You can definitely look us up on that as well. Also, too, you can check us out where podcasts can be found at, definitely on Podbean and so forth. And so, once again, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate your ear. We On Fire Sports Podcast, the spot.